What I was calling to talk about, I've heard you talk about faith, and you even mentioned it today, and that I disagree with you about. That in my personal life experience, it's not possible to live a life in this world because you can never be 100% certain about anything without having faith.
You don't need to be. So this notion that faith is believing things when you're not 100% certain is a con job, because there's nothing that we can be 100% certain about. And so
no, but
if there's nothing you can be 100% certain about, then every belief is held in the face of not being absolutely certain. My point. My point is that faith is not a useful foundation or pathway to a good understanding or accurate understanding of reality.
This might be a good time to do definitions.
Yeah.
Okay, allow me to give you a good secular example of what faith would be. Like when you take a plane somewhere, you have faith in the competency of the pilot that he's going to be able to pilot the plane and you're not going to crash and die.
No. I have a reasonable expectation based on evidence. If you ask me, why do you trust the pilot? I can point to the actual evidence. I can show you his training certificate, the number of hours that he's flown. I can show you the repair rules, things on the plane, the maintenance on the plane. All of those things build a confidence level that is proportional to the actual empirical evidence. That is not the same. That is not the same as having faith that there is a God, because you can't back that up.
But for all you know, before he came to work that day, his wife could have broke up with him the night before, and he smashed out of his mind.
Yes, which is why I don't claim to be absolutely certain about anything or that. My confidence is proportional to the evidence, and I can point to the evidence. That is not the same as what people talk about when they say that they believe in God based on faith.
Yeah. We tend to use faith to mean, the thing you might believe in spite of having evidence for it, without evidence for it. And that we think is a negative thing, right?
That was the other thing you wanted to talk about, definitions. My research into what the biblical faith in the original Hebrew or ancient Greek language that it was scribed in actually would translate into our modern day culture as trust or confidence. I place my trust and confidence.
No, so one of the things
my research has shown me.
Well, okay, your research, I would say, is flawed, because one of the primary verses about faith, it says it is the evidence, and faith is not evidence.
He's referring to a particular Bible quote.
Faith is the evidence of things unseen. That's the verse. That's not the same as what you're talking about, just having confidence based on evidence. If I ask you why you believe something, and you have good reasons, and you have empirical evidence for it,
we don't need faith.
You provide those good reasons and empirical evidence.
Right.
Why is it? Because as soon as I ask someone, why do you believe in God, and they say that it's based on faith, they're admitting that they don't have a good reason.
Okay. Fair enough. I have called your show before, like a couple years ago or something. Let me just give you a little bit of a background about this. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I came to the belief in God because I am a recovered alcoholic criminal. And so all the evidence in my life at the point in time where I came to believe in God told me that I'm a hopeless, lost criminal who's going to spend the rest of my life in and out of jail, because this was the behavior pattern I had established from the time I was a teen until into my mid to late 20s. So against all evidence, against all psychological profiles that were done on me, I believed that I could change my life and I could break free of this criminal behavior.
Yeah.
There's nobody in criminal law that was going to predict your future like that. Nobody's going to tell you that this is how you are and you can't be rehabilitated. That's a false assumption on your part.
You know, they do the risk assessment psychological profiles, right?
Sure. It ends up, Mark, it ends up with a probability. Here, if we take somebody's history and we say, what's the probability of recovery? What's the probability of rehabilitation? What's the probability of recidivism? They're never going to be 100%. So you changed your life, and you want to give credit to something that you can't prove.
That's right. You should take the credit for that. I think you're being robbed here.
Okay, but even if I took the credit, I still had to have faith in myself that because I refused to listen to what this psychological profile about me said, that I was going to spend the rest of my life in jail.
Sure, you can have confidence and be convinced that you can change yourself. Do you know why? Because you have evidence that you've done that before. You just hadn't done it on this particular issue.
Right. But, okay, all I'm trying to say is that if I didn't have faith, I would have given in to what the psychological profile about me said, and I would still be hopelessly going in and out of jail.
Right, but Mark, you said a minute ago that you had faith in yourself. And what you mean there...
No, I'm saying at the very least, I had to have faith in myself.
Okay, even if and I'm saying that at the most you had to have faith. But the thing is, you had faith in yourself. You had confidence that despite what you were being told, you could do better.
Okay, but I also got to admit here, you can say it's a crutch or whatever, but I did need some kind of external source because everything in my environment was telling me this is where you're going to spend the rest of your life. So
sure, and the same is true for Dumbo's magic feather, but that doesn't mean that the feather was actually magic, was it?
And you may have benefited from the community you got involved with, and you may have had better support and been around people that were leading a better life through whatever reason. And anyway, our point is, it's a big leap to attribute that to God, right? Because a lot of people do this all the time that aren't religious and don't pray to God or whatever. And I don't see any reason to believe in a God. And so how can you attribute this thing to a God that we don't even know exists?
Yeah. So Matt, you don't think that faith should be rehabilitated? You think the term should just be changed to confidence and don't even use the word faith anymore? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You have a confidence level in something. There's nothing that we can be absolutely certain about. Fundamentally, and I think you hit it right when you talked about having faith in yourself. You had confidence. And it could be that you might have been wrong. It might have been that you had no real opportunity for recovery and you would have fallen back into your patterns. That happens to other people. It's not different from I lost my car keys and I searched and searched and couldn't find them. And I said a prayer and I found them. Now, that prayer could be that there's a magical being that lives outside of space and time who found my car keys for me, or it could have been the sort of thing that calmed me and gave me focus so that I could actually accomplish finding my car keys. How do you tell the difference and determine whether Dumbo's feather is magical or not?
It's like I said, it's like the placebo effect. How do you know if it's something that's happening in our minds or...
Yeah. And so if your reason for believing in a God, you acknowledge is potentially a placebo effect that you don't have evidence for, that may have been a false catalyst to motivate you. The question is, why would you believe in a God based on that when you acknowledge that it could be something else?
Well, because it could in fact be a God. I could really be in communion with the creator of the universe. I don't know.
How do you tell?
Well, I don't, it produces positive results in my life. So you know the saying, right? If it works, don't change it.
Yeah, but my concern is whether or not it's real. And the thing that you want to attribute it to as working for, we know that it fails elsewhere. So it's like if I've got Dumbo's magic feather and it convinces me that I can fly, the way to tell the difference about whether the feather's real or not, whether it's magical or not, is to put it to the test and give it to others to see if it can fly, not keep going and saying, well, it could be magical, so I'll hang on to it. Put the feather down and see if you can fly without it, and now all of a sudden you'll know whether or not you need the feather. But whether or not you need the feather doesn't tell you whether the feather's doing the thing.
Okay, I hear you there, but the whole thing with me with putting the feather down, like I think of that the ancient Greek mythology of Icarus. I don't want to fly too close to the sun and crash and die because, like, you've heard the saying.
So you're going to keep believing because you're afraid something bad will happen if you stop believing? What kind of God would want you to keep believing based on a fear of what might happen if you didn't?
No, I'm going to keep believing because it's producing positive results in my life, and it's helping me to live a pro-social, functional life and stay clean and free of alcohol, drugs, and crime.
Okay, how's that different from Lucky Socks?
A lot of baseball players swear by Lucky Socks.
Well, because Lucky Socks don't wash my guilt and shame away from me and I'm not burdened by.
How does God wash your guilt and shame away?
That's the whole Christian premises, that by what Christ did on the cross, I am no longer.
I'm familiar with the story. I'm asking you, how do you know that that's the case? Is it just because you've convinced yourself you don't need to feel guilty?
That's the other thing. Like, through my whole experience of trying all kinds of different secular therapy processes while I was in jail, self-talk and all kinds of other stuff, none of it worked. But when I started reading the Bible and praying, I felt like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. I didn't feel this burden of shame and guilt anymore for these things that I'd done to end up where I was.
Maybe that's a bad thing. If I've done bad things to people, and a book and an ideology makes me not feel guilty, when I really should be making amends and focusing on what I've done wrong so that I can correct it rather than having it magically washed away, maybe that's a bad thing.
No. I'm not saying I didn't feel guilty anymore. I'm saying my shame translated into guilt, so I could have the confidence to make amends by being a pro-social, functioning member of society.
And how do you know you can't do that through purely secular means?
I don't know. That's like I said, my personal life experience. Like, I'm not pushing this on anybody. I'm just saying this is how it's worked out for me.
Well, do you care if it's true, Mark, or do you just care if it's useful?
Well, of course I care if it's true.
Then how would you go about finding out if it's true?
Well, I have done. I'm not I'm not trying to push this on anybody, man. I went through all kinds of different research. I looked at things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and other things like that, and I've heard all kinds of different claims. But part of my secular therapeutic treatment process, I read this book called Prison Chains Broken.
I'm asking, how would you find? You say you care if it's true, and you care more that whether it's true than whether or not it happens to be useful or beneficial or a placebo or anything.
I say that's about 50-50.
What's about 50-50? Yeah, either there's a God or there's not.
No, I'm saying
it's motivation.
For me, if it's true and if it's useful, I'd say it's about 50-50 because...
Oh, so you're not primarily concerned with whether or not it's true. If it happens to be useful, you're okay with the fact that it might not be true.
Sure, because it's helping me to be...
So what's your view on the Bible?
My view on the Bible? I take it as the Word of God.
All right, so are you okay with owning slaves?
No, but that's Old Testament stuff.
Well, so the Old Testament is not useful?
I didn't say that. I said...
Or the Old Testament was a mistake?
No, I didn't say that either.
So
that's a whole other discussion and ball of wax and something else we could completely unpack. And
sure, but the point that I'm trying to make is you're willing to accept this because it's useful. What happens if you continue to accept the teachings of the Bible and they come in conflict with what it means to be a decent person, where people can be property and women are second-class citizens to men? Or the idea that substitutionary atonement is a good idea, or what it tells you about an afterlife determines how you're going to vote and what kind of world you're going to live in because you've bought into a doctrine that basically says being homosexual is something that is an abomination. Do you think that?
I think everybody has the right to make their own choice, and I really don't know. I know Don sitting beside you is gay. I really don't know what my opinion is. I've seen different studies done on the homosexual thing. Is it?
Yeah, but the Bible says that if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, it is an abomination, and they are deserving of death. Do you agree with that?
I'm not the judge. That's not my decision.
Well, that's a cop-out. The bigger point here is when you open the door to the religion, you bring in a whole lot of baggage It's got a whole lot of negative stuff with it.
It seems that you're just cherry picking the parts you like and ignoring the things that might be uncomfortable for you. How do you think God's going to look at you when you decided on your own, without guidance from God, about which passages you should pay attention to and which ones you should conveniently ignore?
Oh, I'm not ignoring them. I'm saying it's my calling as a Christian to love everybody and not judge anybody. Whether what they're doing is right or wrong is not my position or place to judge them. I accept them as they are and love them for who they are. And I don't bring any condemnation or judgment against anybody because I'm not God. I don't judge people. I just accept you and love you and try to shine what I believe the light of Jesus Christ on everybody. That's what I do.
Well, I don't understand shine the light of Jesus Christ, but why can't you accept and love people without buying into a doctrine that says you're not supposed to?
I don't see anywhere in the doctrine where it says that I'm not supposed to do that. Everywhere I see in the doctrine says
right, because you're picking out the verses you like. You're not looking at the verses that say you are not to have any communion with non-believers, that the fool has said in his heart there is no God, that there are none of them who can do any good, and that these are people you're supposed to not be in kinship with, and that homosexuals deserve to be killed, and witches deserve to be killed, and people can own slaves as long as they don't die within a couple days of beating them, and all of these things. And the very notion, by the way, let's say, do you think there's an afterlife?
Yeah, I believe there's an afterlife.
Is there a heaven and a hell?
Possibly.
Am I going to heaven or hell?
I don't know, Matt. I'm not God.
Okay.
But
what do you think's going to happen based on your understanding of your religion? Is anybody going to hell? Is Don going to hell?
That would depend on you. I can't say like what you're going to do. I don't know. For all I know.
Do people? Okay, let me try it this way. Do people deserve to go to hell?
You don't. No offense. I'm not trying to call you ignorant or anything, but I don't think you have the right concept or understanding of what hell is.
Well, I asked you about your concept of hell.
My concept of hell is eternal separation from God.
Okay, does that mean that I would just, if I was sent to your hell, am I just floating out somewhere where God isn't?
Well, put it this way. Here, it's an eternal state of fame. So imagine the richest, most powerful person that ever existed, say like Hugh Hefner or whatever. You got an invitation to go to his party, and you refused, and then everybody goes, and then you go banging on the gate wanting in, and he says, no, sorry, you said no, so out you are. Now, you're in a state of shame because you missed out on this, and you could have been there, but you arrogantly refused.
How is it, first of all, how can I possibly be separated from God if God is everywhere?
Frank, I'm sure you've heard of the apologist Frank Turek, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he covers that really well. I'm
not interested in what Frank Turek has to say because I have no more reason to take his word for it than yours or Paul's or Mark's or Jesus's. I want to know what you think. How can if God is everywhere, how can it be possible to be eternally separated from God? There is an answer, by the way. I'm just wondering if you know it.
I don't know. Okay, I don't pretend to know everything. I don't know.
Do you see? Here's the thing: is you bought into a doctrine that you don't seem to know or care much about, other than where it's useful to you.
No. I do actually. I know. Like I've actually read the Bible from cover to cover, and I've studied it, and I've studied it for almost 20 years.
Cool.
So I do.
Then why is it that you don't have opinions on these things?
I have opinions on the things where opinions are appropriate. Like I have an opinion on Noah's flood, for example. Like I've heard your side say that as God is depicted, Yahweh is depicted in the Bible, that he was immoral for flooding the earth.
Well, first of all, I don't think it happened. Do you think it actually happened?
Well, yes, actually I do.
So you think that there was a time when the entire earth was flooded and covered with water?
Yeah.
And that one family with an old drunk and his sons and their daughters and a bunch of animals are the only things that survived and repopulated the earth?
Yeah.
Do you have any evidence for that?
For the flood?
For any of it?
the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, fossils of sea shells and clams at the top of Mount Everest, polystrata fossils where there's tree trunks in vertical positions upside down with the roots, and these are found all over the world. The metaphysical evidence of flood myths all around the world.
Wait. I was on board with your evidence, although that there are actual scientific explanations involving plate tectonics, that is how mountains form, which is why you end up with shells there. Also, those other things can be explained by local floods and other stuff. But what the hell is metaphysical evidence?
Oh, I thought you knew what metaphysics is.
I know. I just want to know why you're talking about metaphysical evidence. I'm talking about empirical evidence for something, and
Okay, fine. I won't introduce the metaphysical evidence. I'll keep to the physical evidence. But the polystrata, the upside down trees, and they find these in
you should Google answers to creationist claims, and you'll find talkorigins.org, where actual scientists will point out what's actually wrong with what you're talking about. And it's not not evidence for a global flood.
See, what you just said, this is a problem I have. Like, why does a secular scientist, why is his PhD any more valid than a creation Christian scientist PhD?
Because one of them is based on science and the other one's not.
Okay, but they both went to an academic place of study. Like John Lennox, for example, he got his PhD in mathematics from Cambridge University. So why is Stephen
you
Hawking's
can't prove
PhD?
God with mathematics. You see, what you find is that these people who have advanced degrees don't have science to back up. I don't believe what Richard Dawkins says about evolution just because he has a PhD in biology.
Look up Kent Hovind's PhD.
I accept what Dawkins says because of the evidence behind it. This is the thing, is you are focused on a cult of people. Oh, well, this person's a scientist and they said so I'm going to take their word for it. I'm believing things because of the evidence, not what some scientist said, or just the fact that somebody got a PhD from somewhere.
Okay, what about David Berlinski, who's a neutral? He's an agnostic. He wrote the book The Devil Delusion in rebuttal to Dawkins' the God Delusion, and he says that Darwin evolution is not it's a hypothesis, a scientific hypothesis at best, not even a theory.
Okay, he doesn't understand Darwinian evolution, which, by the way, is not what evolution by means of natural selection is a way to explain observations. We have mountains of evidence for common descent, including Francis Collins, the Christian former head of the Human Genome Project, acknowledges that even if there was no fossil evidence, the chromosomal evidence enough, for the fusing of chromosome 2, for example, would be enough to support the idea of common descent.
Okay.
So this is an unusual call, and I apologize because we're probably going to move on. But
all right, that's fine. I appreciate the time.
You called in to talk about faith and seemed to agree that it probably wasn't a path and that you had faith in yourself and then you had reasons for it, and now you're onto the science and you believe in a flood. I find it strange that you can deny the fundamental facts about science that are some of the most attested to scientific findings in history, particularly biology, and yet you can't tell me about your own beliefs about whether or not you think people are deserving of hell.
Well, like I said, it's just an eternal separation from God. Like,
how can you be separated from God who's everywhere? You think about that and call us back another time. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, bye.
The answer, by the way, if he's still watching, is annihilation theory, which is something that Billy Graham ascribes to. Basically, all of us heathens would cease to exist at the time of our death, which I guess means I'm right if I don't believe that there's an afterlife, at least for me. But this notion that heaven is like a Hugh Hefner party that we just didn't submit our invitation to is nonsensical. Because
the whole thing is lost in me.
Well, I mean, look at the model. There's a God who creates everything and sets up the rules for everything and plops you down in a world and tells you to use your brain, essentially gives you a brain by which you figure out what's going on in the world. And this is the same thing you would have to do with regard to evaluating whether or not a God exists, and we don't see sufficient evidence for that. And the only way that we can be, even hope to pretend that we have evidence is to deny reality, to deny the fundamental understanding that we've learned about reality from science, Basically the only science that theists reject is whatever science disagrees with their religious teachings. And now you've got, a God who came down to earth and incarnated himself in human form to serve as a loophole for rules that he created, and he really wants you to come to heaven, but you can say no. And if you say no, then, well, he'll just make you cease to exist when you're dead. Please explain what the purpose of this entire thing is. Doesn't God know?
Oh, but you can't understand his miraculous and mysterious ways.
Yeah, well, but I mean, doesn't God know whether or not I'm going to hell? And if he knows, why did he make us go through all this tap dance and not just put us where he wants us?
There you go.
I don't know. Makes sense to me.